Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched 1997's Cube. Um, this is sort of the ending of the three, assuming I don't reorder these, of the sort of trio of pseudo sci-fi horror films that I wanted to watch. I grouped these all together just because I don't know, because I could. Um, Cube is a film I hadn't actually thought about for a while, but I was sort of I had this like nagging idea in my mind that I wanted to watch a couple of films that seemed like they fit together, and I just couldn't. I don't know if I had entirely conceptualized which films would go in that pool, and then I had the idea, and then I filled in the blanks. I don't know if that makes any sense. I sound like a crazy person. I should start the video over, but I'm not going to because I am a crazy person. I watched Cube, which is a very low budget horror film from 1997 that has a bit of a cult following but is largely unknown. It's a Canadian film that did not get a wide release. It's 90 minutes long and it was made for allegedly $350,000. And frankly, that all sort of points towards I'm going to like this either because it's shit or because it's, really impressive and great. And I won't tell you how yeah, I will tell you how I feel about it. I'm disappointed. It's a great concept executed with some disappointing choices. Is basically what it comes down to. If you are already familiar with this film, you probably know the concept already. If you don't, frankly, I'm just gonna spoil it now because there's no way to talk about it otherwise. There's not that much to this film. It's a simple low budget horror film. The sort of framework is the plot or is the story. So I don't know. I'm just gonna sort of I still don't think it spoils the film or makes it not worth watching, but proceed at your own caution. Cube is about a bunch of random people who don't know each other being trapped in some sort of contraption they don't understand. A series of interconnected rooms where they wake up not knowing how they got there, and they have to escape. And they discover there are traps between them and their escape. Fantastic concept. Brilliant. It's simple. It doesn't require, as far as low budget goes, it's brilliant. Allegedly, this film was, I don't even know where I heard this. Some years ago, I heard someone say, somebody of some authority, say that apparently they made this film with basically 1.5 sets. Like, it's basically a room and a half is how they made this film. Is they built one full room and another half a room, and that was it. And the rest of it is done with lighting and some some post-processing CG stuff. And it's brilliant. It's an incredibly simplistic way to do a complex concept, to keep your scope and your budget low. It's a really, really great idea. And especially when the major part of the film, the major drive of the film is not the setting itself, but the characters that you've put in there and how they react to their the experiences they're having, which is, I think, a marker of quality horror film instead of just some sort of, jump scare bullshit fest. That is a great, simple idea that can go a long way. Unfortunately, it kind of doesn't. I'm just going to rattle off that the script is not very good. The the script is not very good. The plot is not very good. The actors are not. They vary. There's one or two. The performances vary. Some of them are overtly bad, and some of them could have just been bad direction. Um, Weirdly, the sort of main character, the one we sort of get attached to first, is might arguably be the worst one in the entire film, which is not good. Needless to say. But the characterization is also not that deep, so even if the actors are particularly good, there's only so much they have to work with, and if they have bad direction, it's a compounding problem. So unfortunately, I think the lack of character depth and the lack of my personal investment in the as a viewer, engagement and investment in the characters themselves, to the point of almost lack of interest at some points, really undercuts what's otherwise a really good idea. Really, this is following the characters as they attempt their escape and are coming up against stresses and their like devolving sanity and lack of like resources to work with, water and food and so on, and how they react to each other, and how their inner demons and the things that they've brought in to the cube with them affect how they think and how they interact with others. Again, that's a really good idea in concept and a lot of potential to explore there, a lot of different ways you could go. Unfortunately, what it really turns into is, for the most part, some like tropey crap, bad dialogue, characters that are shallow and not that interesting, and just, like I said, not a lot of investment into the characters. Furthermore, it's worsened by this issue of pacing, which you'd think when this should be like the perfect framework for doing a simple pacing. They're going from identical room to identical room, except for ones that have traps in them. So, they can move essentially at their own speed. Their only pressing matter being their own, resources and ability to survive. So if you want to take moments for them to really try and rush through a couple of rooms, that's a certain speed, and then you can reel it back in and say, all right, they need to rest, or they've hit like a moment of conflict or something like that. But pacing wise, it really suffers in that area as well, as the characters seem to have arguments at somewhat arbitrary times. Unfortunately, the progression sections are really largely made as montage, and I understand that they probably just want to avoid spending a ton of money in either practical or CG effects, to show the rooms as they try and progress through, and also to keep the pacing of the film up. But I really think that does a disservice to the sense of scale and time, because they are there for a long time, moving through a lot of rooms, and you really only get that through dialogue and these sort of montages, which is not very compelling as a filmmaking style, if you can even call it that. Likewise, their actual means of progression and the things that drive sort of the ups and downs of the plot are sort of come out of nowhere and are delivered pretty poorly. So they discover things about their the cube, and the things they discover often sort of come out of the blue and are delivered with, like, I don't know, they're not delivered well. The dialogue's very bad. So yeah, yeah, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's just rough. On its face, not only, like, you don't have to do anything crazy with this. I'm not expecting, incredible performances from the actors, or really deep characterization. There's only so much you get out of this. But when they do make some effort in this film to talk about who the characters are, but then what they deliver is so sort of trite. In fact, I'd say a lot of the dialogue really falls under that header of trite as well. It just becomes hard to keep up with it, or hard to want to continue to be engaged with it. Obviously, you want to see how things turn out for the characters, but beyond that, like, seeing a genuine struggle or having a genuine emotional investment or one or some of the characters is not that good. And even for, like, anti-hero characters or deeply flawed characters, like are very common in horror films, even that is sort of beyond the capabilities of this film, it seems, as they just can't seem to get the depth in there. It, like I said, it seems to pick up at random intervals. They're suddenly like, oh, we've made a discovery, so now we will move the plot along. And there are conflicts in the meantime that, come to a head at certain times. Possibly the most unfortunate part is the ending. Which, give me 30 seconds and I'm going to spoil it starting from here. They reach the end and they open the door to their escape, and then one of the characters comes out from behind them and stabs another character in the back, even though there's no way they could have gotten in there silently just to kill somebody, and only one person gets out. It's dumb. All right, we'll wait for the 30 seconds. And it's about there. Yeah, the ending's very bad, very unsatisfying, undercuts itself for no apparent reason. It's baffling. So that's a real, black mark on it right at the end, when it was already sort of struggling to be really compelling. Despite all of what I've just said, I don't hate the film. It's still an interesting and compelling film in some respects. If you've got 90 minutes to spend on a weird indie horror film, and see something that has gone on to influence a bunch of other media things in various media, I think it's still sort of worth your time. But just be aware that you're not getting something great, and that you might be a bit disappointed, I guess. On the whole, I mean, I'm aware that they made sequels to this, which were, I mean, why would you make this a sequel to this? They don't really delve into the backstory very much in the first place. So unless the sequels are about the existence of the cube or whatever. Oh shit. Did I open up this video calling it The Cube? Because I may or may not have. The name of the film is Cube, not The Cube. So I may have fucked that up. We'll find out. um, but unless the sequels, which were panned, try to like elaborate on the backstory, I can't fathom why you would even attempt it. There's also supposedly a remake, a Japanese remake in the works right now, due to be released this year. So I don't know. I'm always kind of curious. Japanese cinema has a fascinating. Let me just go on a tangent since this video is a little short. Japanese cinema has a fascinating relationship to money and also Western properties. They Cinema in general in Japan has a history, especially in the post-war era, of not being funded particularly well. There's a lot more investment that goes into TV and into animation as well, obviously. But their like larger cinema stuff generally tends to be fairly low budget, relatively speaking, especially in the modern era. And so having them remake but that said, they do make remakes and spin-offs and reimaginings fascinatingly well on low budgets, and also reinterpreting Western properties or Western cinematic concepts through a more Japanese cultural lens is a fascinating process. There's a film called Sukiyaki Western Django, which is just a bizarre film, but worth the watch. It's like a Japanese Yakuza take on the Western genre, but also incorporating aspects of like both spaghetti westerns and then like Western critique that came in the post-Western period. It's a fascinating film. It's indicative of a lot of things in Japanese cinema that I find really interesting. So to wrap that back around, I'd be very interested just to see what they might do with a remake of this. If they, keep it a similar sort of similarly structured and those sorts of things. It's the sort of thing I could see working really well with a Japanese production team. So I might have to check that one out when it comes out. Anyway, random tangents aside. Yeah, I don't know. It's 90 minutes. You could spend your time watching worse things. And it's a fascinating little indie film. So take that for what you will. This is my weird ramble. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I will be back with something else next week. And I've been the Social Solipsist. I will see you guys next time.